Welcome to the Power of Connection. I am Bob Umar, five-time TEDx speaker, and this is where we make influence human again. One idea, one conversation, one thing you can use. Let's get into it.
As a professional speaker, I've done 1,000 keynotes and workshops across 4 continents all over the world. I've been a professional speaker for 17 years, and I used to run a speaker mastermind. And one of the modules I did on that mastermind was how to deliver a world-class keynote, because I've seen a lot of keynotes out there, and sometimes I'm, to use the British word, gobsmacked that there are people making a boatload of money with really, really terrible presentations or workshops. And especially some of the ones I've seen in the US, because the US pays a lot more than other places. Canada's really cheap. And so you people pay a lot in the US. And what's interesting is like some of them, I've seen some really bad ones in conferences and bad ones at events, or even trains. I've co-trained, I'm training a company, and then someone else comes in and they do this whole thing about networking. It's not about business cards. And okay, great. What else? Like, it's really basic stuff. And I'm like, okay, let's really get into the deeper stuff. And so over the years, I've honed kind of what works, what doesn't work, and what I think does really well when it comes to a world-class presentation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you what I do personally as part of my model. Okay, and I'm going to do that by sharing my PowerPoint. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about here. So you can see my PowerPoint here, right? Okay. So this is a talk that went really, really well. It was basically a talk with a recreation facilities company. And what was interesting about these guys is they hired me before the pandemic. Pandemic hit, and then the pandemic fell apart. And they kept me. They kept waiting for me for 2 years before I finally went this past May, last May, and I delivered a talk. And one of the first things I'll say, obviously, I mean, what is the number one rule when it comes to delivering a great keynote? Why don't you put that in a chat box right now and tell me what that is? What's the number one? What do you think is the number one rule for delivering a world-class keynote? Just type in the chat box. I want to see what you say. Look at me, I'm going to my virtual training mode here. Just type away. I want to see what you say. The number one rule. Oh, they're thinking, are they? Okay. Yeah, go ahead and think. Engagement. Okay. Connecting. Anything else? I mean, you can voice it if you don't want to type. I mean, if voicing it's easier, that's fine. Okay, that's it. We only have 2 people suggestions. Okay, I love other suggestions, but let me know.
I'd say change the game with your talk. Change the game, change the vibe, change the energy.
Okay.
Of the room.
Okay. A lot of what you're saying is they all connect. The number one rule with delivering a world-class keynote is know your audience. Okay. Number one, it affects everything. It affects engagement, it affects connection, it affects intent, and it affects all the things you're going to do when you're trying to win them over. And that includes 2 things. One is the audience that's going to be there in front of you, as well as the organizers. So my relationship with these RFABC organizers was a big part of knowing my audience, as well as knowing the people that were going to be there. And that's the number one rule. Now, when I set up my PowerPoints, obviously I do a lot of branding throughout the PowerPoint. So I throw in pictures of them in the talk, which I think they like. And then the other thing that I do is, what's interesting is that a lot of people start with, hey, thanks everyone for being here. Really glad to be here in beautiful British Columbia. How's everyone doing today? Go Panthers, whatever it might be. And one of the tips is to not do that. Get right into the talk with a compelling question, a compelling statement, or a compelling story. Dive right into it. You can do any sort of introductions or agendas or what you're going to talk about or whatever later, but get them. You want to get them. Just like we say in content, the first 2 lines, we say in videos, the first 5 seconds. In a keynote, that first 5 minutes, you have to win the crowd. And you're not going to win them over by going through the agenda and thanking the organizers and really great to be here. That's not how you do it, right? You engage them in some sort of way. Okay, so that's important. And so what I often will do is I'll start with a story, right? So I usually do like a good question too, but then I'll tell a story. And one of the stories that I tell, this, and I make the story relevant. So this one, so I always tell a personal story. So this was for the recreation facilities of British Columbia. I told a story of my life as a recreation leader, as a camp counselor. So on the left, that was my first job as a camp counselor when I was like 18, and then I was working with some students in Montreal, and then that's me at another camp that I was working at later, a few more years later. And I told those stories to win them over because I wanted to relate to them. So telling the story also gets their attention. Okay. Then the other thing I do, again, there's another one of those compelling questions. And I don't even answer the question right. I just say, interesting. Let's think about this. Then I might talk about agenda and what we're going to do. Okay, great. And then sometimes I'm also really big on interactive activities. So I love interactive activities. If there's an opportunity to do a warm up or some sort of activity where we engage people, man, I'll totally do it. Absolutely. Now, there's two ways I engage. Either we do an activity or we talk about their challenges because, and I'll talk about that in a second. So a warm-up activity could be an icebreaker. So we had this big icebreaker, circle of trust. Stand at your table, groups of 6 or 8, five things you have in common, nothing physical or work-related. Focus on your experience and personal traits. And then everyone shared. And that's a great bonding experience. And it only takes literally like 5 to 7 minutes. They do it for 3 minutes, 3 minutes sharing, and then I move on. And I do that on purpose. If it's virtual, I'll do a virtual one, but this was in person. So to me, an activity goes along. Interactivity, for me, that sets me apart. I started out as a team building guy way back in the day, team building events for companies, but the interactive piece is incredibly important. I'm doing a talk next week, and they said, Bobby, what we want is some interaction. Now, they said we don't want team building activities, but we do want you to engage the audience to interact with Q&A, which is my second part, which I love. So I'll talk about that in a second. So there's a lot of so I got this one. I actually got right into a lot of content. But
Bobby,
typically, what I'll do, yeah, go ahead.
Bobby, I'm sorry, real quick. Are you having the group share it at their tables or with the larger group?
I have them share with the larger group. It depends on the size of the audience, Ken. Like, if it's a room of 400 people, then obviously I'll bring the mic over and people will share with the entire audience. But if it's a smaller group of say like 50 to 100 people, then they can share with the entire room, right? So it really depends. But generally speaking, yeah, we share the results, we debrief. The best interactive activities have the activity and also has the debrief, okay? Then the other thing I do with keynotes is I always ask them, tell me about your challenges. I want to hear about it. And the reason I do this is because the challenges I'm asking about is I want to visit them in the content because they're going to see what they said in the content, which they're going to love. And I'm going to answer their questions, which they're going to love. And even better, I'll often have data. So I'll ask the challenges and I'll say, well, here are the challenges that I see. People working in silos, reactive communication, mental well-being. And what's great about this is I've already pre-prepared this, yet they've already brought it up in the section where I asked about their challenges. People love that. It's like, wow, Bobby knows what we were thinking, right? So that works really, really well. The other thing that I do is I'm also a big data believer. So here we go. 34% of employees don't speak up because of fear of retribution, failure perception. Data, 76% of workers believe their company should be doing more to support the mental health of their workforce. I share a lot of data because for me, the formula is personal stories plus data plus case studies plus a call to action or a plan of action for them that they can actually incorporate is the way that they're going to feel like they can do it. You got that? Okay. Personal stories, data, case studies, and a plan of action. This is what they need to know that they can do this and move to that next level. And so for me, data is a big part of so there's more data there. And then and then also that the 5 points, I summarized it with a key takeaway on my slide. Here I go. I'm saying, let's do something about it. So now we're talking about what's our action plan? What are we going to do about it? So for me, that's kind of how I get their attention. And I'll share, different, we did activities, but this one was a very activity-based one, which was kind of fun. We did a brief, And then I did another question. This was very introspective. Mixing up different types of activities is fun too. One where they're actively moving around, one where it's very deep and introspective. If you don't have time for two, you pick one that's active, one that's introspective. But again, that's my general way. This one was a lot. I had an hour and a half, so I did a lot of it. This one was a very active one. It was very fun. They loved it. And then I share a little, and then I say, okay, how are we going to do this? And so then I give them another story in between about what I went through. And this is where I shared some case studies of several different community groups. I talked about TLB Club. I talked about LinkedIn Local Toronto meetups. I talked about these other ones I did, Cool Connection Humans of Canada. And I basically showed how they were all collaborative cultures. So those are now case studies to show how you can build success when you actually do it the right way with what I talked about. And then, I throw them, how did I build these collaborative communities and cultures that work with me for free? And I basically, clear vision values, clear roles, expectations, and meeting up, coaching, support, and check-ins. And so when I give them this, at this point, they've gotten the stories, they've gotten the data, they've gotten the case study, and now I'm like, this is what you do. Are they bought into it? Yes, because the goal of a world-class keynote is to change the way people think or to adopt the way that you want them to think. That's incredibly important, right? You want them to know the importance of LinkedIn. You want them to know the importance of profiles. You want them to know the importance of coaching. You want them to know the importance of personal branding. Whatever it is, you have to make them be like, oh, yes, why are we not doing this? And then, of course, I shared little things, and I kept going, and I started doing. So then I started doing more data, and of course, I went to a lot of different things that I shared. And the other thing I do is I always end with final thoughts, right, to get them motivated about collaboration and connection, culture. This one was about the critical belief. So I gave them a thought process, what we talked about, and then I summed it up. I always sum up at the very end what we discussed, because the golden rule also giving a keynote is you tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them what you told them. Okay? Because people can't remember stuff. The other thing with the talk is, what is the one thing you want them to be able to do? And you have to think about those things as you put that talk together. So, from that standpoint, that's what, and again, the last thing I'll say is visuals, right? So my PowerPoints are full of visuals. If you don't have PowerPoint, any sort of way to create visual storytelling and visual content and flip charts, whatever you can do to get them to see, feel, and hear it, all those things add to your dynamic presentation. But what I would say, my general rule, though, is know your audience, open differently than you think, then focus on personal storytelling, data and evidence, case studies, and then what is the action plan that they need. And don't give them like the 17 steps, please. Just give them the 1, 2, maybe 3. Sometimes it's 5, but 1, 2, 3. If it's a day long, you can give them 5. If it's an hour, 1, 2, 3. And then, of course, final thoughts to sum up what we just talked about and invite them. And then the last thing I'll do that sets me apart as a speaker is I tell the organizers in advance, I want to leave 10 minutes for Q&A, because I find the biggest nuggets come from the questions and answers. So I lay a lot of stuff in the narrative and say, look, make sure you save some questions for me at the end, because I'm going to stay here. I'm going to engage you guys. I'm going to answer your question to help you and your teams achieve the success that you want. And so I leave 10. And also that's good because people love it when you end early. So if there are no questions, and let's say they want to go, and sometimes it happens. We're done 10 minutes early. Yeah, let's go. Otherwise, I'll take a few questions, and that way I'll provide even more value. Okay, so that's what I do. That's my model. That's my secret method.
That's it for this episode. If it gave you one useful idea, share it with someone who needs it, and follow the show so the next one finds you. I'll see you next time on The Power of Connection.